Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast, your number one resource to remind you that we're going to be able to watch UND on Friday on CBS Sports Network, and Clevin won't be playing because he's kicked out for his fourth game misconduct of the year, which is rather impressive, actually. I'm Weldy, sitting with Andrew here, talking all things Husky hockey, college hockey related, and obviously, huge matchup coming up with North Dakota, and it's the team I hate the most out of anyone. Just with number one with a bullet. I used to think, Andrew, you were on the same boat, but now I'm starting to think you actually hate Duluth more. Where do you put in the rivalry scope here?
I mean, historically, North Dakota has gained more cumulative hatred from me throughout the years. But yeah, the Duluth hatred is more of a modern incarnation, and it's really picking up in intensity. So I don't know if it makes sense to compare relative hatreds, but yeah, there's no love lost from me when it comes to North Dakota. Let's just keep it at that. Especially if St. Cloud's playing North Dakota that weekend, the hate meter is starting to crack. So, yeah, these are the green bastards, and they always will be. Yeah, I don't like North Dakota, but I hate Duluth as well, and they have it's a different kind of hatred, and I feel more upset when they win, because like when North Dakota, like when they won their last national title, that didn't feel like a fluke to me, where it feels like flukes whenever Duluth wins. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know.
Yeah, I got you. That makes sense. With we didn't really talk about it last. Of course, we have a 2-hour podcast, and I'm like, God, I didn't touch on this topic that I wanted to. Coming off of a bye, so hey, we didn't get swept. That we didn't underperform on the bye, so that's nice. Now, when do you think this bye came at a good time or a bad time for this Huskies team?
I guess I didn't give it that much thought. I mean, there's benefits to both, I suppose. Kind of want to. You don't like to take the bye because then that gives you a chance to flush out any negative feelings from the Duluth and Miami weekends that much quicker. Obviously, having the bye, though, gives you a chance to work on the things that we've been grousing about of late, namely special teams, and also gives you a chance to get some rest, and guys like Brand who haven't been in the lineup for a while, maybe get them healthy. So I can see both sides, but it sounds like you have a hotter take here. So what's your feeling about this?
No, I wouldn't say that I have a hotter take or anything like that. It's just that I can see both sides, like you said. I do think it came at the right time because we don't know the extent of Meyer's injury.
Right.
I do still think he's probably hurt a little more than what's let on. Or maybe not let on is the right, but I do think that there's something maybe a little bit lingering there. So I think giving him some rest right now and kind of just giving this team a little bit of a, you got to shake off these cobwebs. Maybe a little bit of, hey, step away from the game for a little bit, get some rest before you kind of ramp up and get back to the meat grinder we have here at the end of the season. I I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I'm thinking this is a good time to have this bye. And you're coming off now, or North Dakota's coming off getting swept in Denver in just a penalty field series, and a series that I watched a fair bit of those games, and I didn't think North Dakota looked that impressive, which, judging by a little bit of some of their stats coming from the second half of the season, I thought they would have a chance to get a little bit of run on them, but Denver kind of took care of that, no problem, with the same problems that we've seen North Dakota all year, just bad defensive turnovers, and the goaltending isn't there to make the big saves. Der Ritter got pulled the first night, I believe, and
Yep.
Helston didn't fare that much better either game. So it's Huskies. It's the time to really kind of, I think, get right back on the horse and take advantage of this UND team that hasn't been able to live up to kind of their lofty expectations that they always set themselves up on.
Yeah, you mentioned the goaltending. We've been talking about that with North Dakota all season, particularly with that Husky series earlier in the year. Saw both Helston and DeRitter in that series in St. Cloud. I think the article that from Schlossman that I read, that this was the fourth time that DeRitter has been pulled from a game on Friday night in Denver. I was a little surprised to see him get the start on Saturday, DeRitter, coming back from that. But giving up 4 goals on Friday and then 5 on Saturday. Granted, a slew of power play goals there for Denver on Saturday. But the .876 cumulative team save percentage, worst in the country, UND. And so, you generally don't hear of UND being last in the country in any stat, but
in anything.
And with a position so vital as goaltending, that does a lot of explaining of this season too. And thinking again back to that St. Cloud series earlier in the year, defense did not help either that game. And as you mentioned, Clevin being out, one of their better defensemen, being out for the Friday game here. See if St. Cloud can take advantage of that. But guys like Farmer, I remember, had a rough weekend in St. Cloud from the back end. There wasn't too many bright spots defensively or goaltending wise for North Dakota that series. And if St. Cloud can pounce on that, I think they're in decent shape. Special teams, though, is obviously going to be key this weekend. North Dakota leads the country in their power play percentage, over 30% right now. And they actually have a pretty decent penalty kill as well, best in the conference, 19th in the country. One thing I was thinking about, we were talking about power plays, or special teams in general, been a theme, especially the last few weeks or few months even, talking about St. Cloud's play. Thinking, just looking at the nationwide leaderboard for power plays, I'm wondering if it's we're talking about St. Cloud's struggles on the penalty kill, and then conversely, St. Cloud having right now tied for 10th best power play. Wondering if those numbers are a bit skewed because the conference as a whole is a very good power play conference. Right now, 6 teams in the conference are in the top 15 in terms of the best power plays in the country. Only Miami, at 17 and change percent, has a power play that's under the nationwide average. Even CC is at 21st in the country, and they have a 21.6% power play. So, very good power plays is sort of the theme of this conference. And so it's not surprising when you look on the flip side and you see only 2 NCHC teams have an above average penalty kill, North Dakota being one of them, and Colorado College, perhaps surprisingly, being the other.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because obviously other teams get the benefit of playing against St. Cloud's penalty kill,
Correct.
whereas St. Cloud doesn't have the benefit of playing against St.
Well,
Cloud's penalty kill.
And North Dakota, thinking, the number one power play, 30%, they haven't played, of these NCHC teams, and I said the only two above average penalty kill units are UND, who obviously they don't get to play themselves, and CC is the only other team that they haven't played so far. They play them next weekend out in Colorado Springs. So they have only seen the worst 6, who are all 39th and worst in the country, bottom 20 penalty kill units. Those are, plus Lindenwood as well, which is literally the worst penalty kill unit in the nation. UND played them earlier in January. So they've been beating up on a lot of bad penalty kill units. But my point here is perhaps the St. Cloud, a lot of the NCHC numbers, a lot of these NCHC teams have bad penalty kills. What should I take out of that? That these penalty kill units are so bad, or that these power play units that these NCHC teams are so good? It's a little bit of both, and to see that the conference is pretty equal in terms of you got very good power plays and then also pretty weak penalty kills. Maybe we're trying to dissect it too much, and it's just you're running into good units, or it's just maybe these good units, good power play teams, are just running into bad units. I don't know. I found that to be an interesting observation in the stats. But anyway, you want to draw it up, maintaining UND's power play and keeping that to a minimum is obviously going to be a recipe for success here for St. Cloud. And I don't know how confident I am in that. I'm pretty unconfident about that, actually. I have a good chance that we're going to be coming back next weekend and being like, again, what's with this penalty kill for St. Cloud? I would not be shocked. But I do think I'm thinking that they can get a win here this weekend. A place that St. Cloud has not fared too well of late, have not beaten UND in Grand Forks since 2019, which was Larson's first year. They did win a game up there in the 2021 playoff. If you remember, all the playoffs are played up there. They won a couple of games against non-UND teams there, so they have won in the Ralph, but not against UND in 4 seasons. So, yeah. And it's traditionally a tough place to play.
We played the championship game against UND there and lost 5-3. I think that was
a good game, but
so
tough place to play. But it's a team, as you mentioned, that's maybe licking its wounds right now. Another, they have a good weekend in Miami, but then come back a week later and take 2 losses against Denver. 0-4 against Denver this year, UND. Sure, that's not sitting well with their fans, considering that rivalry with the Pioneers. But and struggling at home as well. Losing to Western Michigan, getting swept by them earlier this calendar year. So they haven't played, like I said, swept by Denver earlier this year in Grand Forks. So North Dakota's looked vulnerable at home as well. It's just like I mentioned, that Lindenwood series squeaked out a couple of wins there at home. So other than that Miami series from 2 weeks ago, where they did kind of lay a whooping on Miami, even their wins have been struggles this year. So this is a team that I definitely think you can have your way with. We saw a little bit of that in St. Cloud, including a St. Cloud comeback win on that second game, coming back from 3-0. And obviously, I like the fact that this is one of those teams like Denver from a couple of weeks ago that I think that St. Cloud's going to get up for this series. I don't think that they need a ton of motivation to get up to play North Dakota. Everyone knows, the hatred is very apparent, and the rivalry is there. So I do think I am confident that we're at least going to get better efforts than we saw against Miami or Duluth going back the last couple of weekends. So I don't know. I'm feeling a split, but what are you thinking for this weekend?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you're talking about special teams. And obviously, you know, their power play up against our penalty kill is just a recipe for disaster. So if you get into a penalty filled game like UND played last weekend, it's I think that's going to really play towards North Dakota's strengths. I always worry about going, like you said, going up to North Dakota. Huskies this year 11-2-2 at home, only 7-6 on the road, and obviously this is where North Dakota is on the at the standings, and we got to put ourselves into position here for home ice. And we're in a very good position right now. We're up 10 points clear of Minnesota Duluth. North Dakota right now is down at 7. This isn't the weekend to give up points, especially after you gave up points last time we played against Miami. And Miami, just before that weekend, got thumped by North Dakota. And then Miami was able to regroup and, get 2 ties out of it. Officially 2 ties. Whatever for the shootouts, but it's it's just like we have to come out with some urgency and some effort and really take it to North Dakota, because we can't. I just worry about that rebound effect, whereas North Dakota I don't think played that well up against Denver. And now they're going to play St. Cloud and look, just like gangbusters. That's what I'm worried about. So it's just that instance of, I mean, if you're gonna take charge of the season, I think this is the weekend to do it. And you have those two uh, missteps here with the last two series, but that can all be kind of washed away if we have a great solid effort here this weekend, and really come out with the majority of the points here at the Ralph against a team that this is a team you should take care of. And it's a team where they're not playing well cohesively. They're not playing well in their own end. They can't stop a puck to save their life. Like on paper, this is the series where we should be able to get it done, but it's some of these little X factors that are creeping in. And it's like I'm a little bit worried here of a letdown, and I'm really hoping that's not going to be the case. But this team really needs to show me something here this weekend.
Another key would be, and we talked about this last week, about St. Cloud's slow starts. And going back to that St. Cloud series, the series in St. Cloud, I should say, in December, UND had leads after the first period in both of those games. Led 2-1 on Friday, 6 straight goals for the Huskies. They led 2-0 after the first period, then they added a third goal in the second to go up 3-0 on Saturday. 6 straight goals by the Huskies. We've been talking about the slow starts here, kind of.
I'm not counting on that again.
I'm counting. I mean, part of the narrative for Notre Dame, for North Dakota this year has been really poor third periods. So I think that gives you a hint as far as this team struggles to give a full 60-minute effort. Talking about North Dakota, I think definitely we'll be able to tell. I think, especially on like the Saturday third period, 6 periods of hockey that weekend. I would expect St. Cloud to still have more gas in the tank and be able to, if the game is tied or 1 goal difference or something like that, I'd feel confident being in St. Cloud's shoes going into the third period situation like that. But digging themselves too deep of a hole is what I kind of worry about, because that's what we've been seeing, not just, as I mentioned, with these North Dakota results from a couple of months ago, but just in recent weeks, St. Cloud digging themselves holes that they've been unable to overcome. And so keep an eye on that. Watching the first period on Friday is going to be very interesting. I think, as I mentioned last week, you see that first 5 minutes, if we are seeing the same kind of lethargic, where is this team? Where are the Huskies? Have they woken up yet? if we see that first period on Friday, I'm going to be worried for the weekend. But if we come out and they look sharp, they look rested, they look like the bye week served them well, they were able to work on some things and focus and getting up for a rival like UND is, then I would feel very confident for the weekend. So really going to focus in on that start both nights, but in particular on Friday. Also, I mean, we talk about UND's goaltending situation, which, I mean, I mentioned earlier in the year they dug into their third stringer. That experiment only lasted one night of giving up 7 goals. Not expecting the third stringer Johnson to be in nets, but I don't know. I would not be shocked to see either DeRitter or Helston on Friday. What about St. Cloud, though? We saw that Bassey gets his first weekend of a 2-start weekend versus Miami. And he got everybody's pal last weekend. Do you go back with him?
Kind of by default.
Right, that's true.
I mean, as much as I would love to say it was outstanding goaltending, nobody else really stood out.
Plus, it was a little bit of Pacino. Scent of a woman.
Yeah,
too,
that's
so
true.
Keep that in mind. But if you don't get that reference, that's good. Continue to be in the dark there. But do you go back to Castor, throwing him in net on Friday, or are you sticking with Bassey? What are you feeling with the goaltending for the Huskies?
I think you go back to the rotation. After a couple games with Castor out, I would say throw him in there on Friday, and then Bassey coming back on Saturday. That's kind of what got you here, and what was so dynamic in the first part of the season that hasn't really, or that consistency hasn't really been here that second half. And maybe that's not a bad thing, but it's kind of getting back to that warm, comforting feeling. And it's weird to say that splitting time with goaltending is a comforting feeling, but I do feel that that's you dance with the girl that brought you, and I think that's what worked at the beginning of the year, and continue to ride that out. So, saying that though, I do think I would feel a little bit more comfortable with Bassey in net versus Castor in that environment, but I would still say get the reins of Castor on Friday and go back to your rotation.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I could see Bassey starting on Friday as well. I've said it before. I don't like the idea of making a decision on Tuesday to say that you're going to have a rotation. Like, if you're going to throw Castor in on Friday,
well, that's why we have the podcast.
That's true.
That is what we do. We can do that.
But if you're gonna put Castor in on Friday, like, don't already plan on having Bassey on Saturday. If Castor stands on his head, then he gets Saturday as well. Like, that's how I would play it. I wouldn't mind seeing Castor again, even though, like we said, Bassey played very well on versus Miami. So I really don't have a strong preference there. I'm
God, in our season preview, did you ever think you would utter that sentence?
No, there's a lot
going back.
There's a lot. I'll have to listen to that coming up, because after the regular season ends, and have to go back to the predictions of the standings.
Our predictions,
sure, is a nightmare. Yeah. But it's always interesting to go back to that, because there's things that, like, I'm sure we weren't struggling to pronounce Dylan Anhorn's name because you are part of the Anhorn clan, as we've mentioned. But I'm sure going back then, like, I remember, because he scored the first goal of the year, if you remember the St. Thomas game. And I remember in our podcast after that, I'm like, oh, I'm sure everyone had that on our bingo card. To now look back and be like, yeah, Anhorn, and then his injuries kind of going to be this big key that St. Cloud needs to overcome. But perhaps being the best player they've had this year, I don't think we were ever having those kind of expectations. Even with Crookshank, too, although Crookshank's cooled off of late, but carried them for a large part of the first half too. So just going back to beginning of the year, what our mindset was is always kind of interesting. But I'm sure too, getting back to this UND series, at that first preview podcast, we were not thinking about UND being in 7th place. when they're going to play this
No.
series in Grand Forks in late February. So, lots.
I'm trying to think. I might have had them at 1.
Think you did. I know you didn't have Denver. I had Denver.
I didn't have Denver, and I think I even had Duluth at 2.
Really?
I think I had Denver at 3. Yeah.
I'm sure I had both of those teams in the top half, but I can't remember. Again, I know I had Denver 1. I had Miami 8, which looks like decent picks at this point. But yeah, the rest of it, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think I had Omaha at 8.
I know that because we've been over that since then. So, but yeah, it should be an interesting weekend of hockey. And like I said, I don't think this is, even though you look at them 7th place. I don't think of this as like you got to get the majority of the points. I think you just need to get a win. Number one, I mean, 4-game losing streak, as you mentioned, has been a while now since we won on the road. Haven't won on the road in 2023 yet. Going back to that Miami series, would have been the weekend after the home UND series in December. Last time this team has won on the road, so we want to get off the schneid in that regard. And also going into Omaha the following week. You can't get too far ahead of yourselves, but again, being 4 games in a row, all on the road coming up here, you want to really avoid a long losing streak or winless streak, let's say. And you're on a 4-gamer right now. You want to put the skids to that as quickly as you can. So I'm just at least a win this weekend. And I think based on the talent and based on the results that we saw versus these two teams a couple of months ago, I do feel like St. Cloud has a good opportunity to take the majority of the points this weekend too. So trying to stay positive about this weekend, but just wins and losses aside, just I'm interested how this team responds mentally and seeing how like I said, how they dealt with this bye week. Those questions will be answered sort of like I said the first couple of minutes. I'm just curious about how they come out on Friday. Because you're going to need to, the overcoming adversity and being able to shake off some bad results. And these are the things that coming down the stretch you're going to have to respond to. And then in the NCAA tournament, you don't have the chance to overcome one mistake or one bad loss. It's because it's a one and done situation. So I hope that this team mentally is in the right spot, and maybe this past adversity has given them that sort of lesson, and they've turned around here. But we won't figure out whether or not that's true or not until they play these games. So very intrigued to see this weekend.
Yeah, and kind of the one person that I'm really looking at here to, I don't know if step up is the right word, but it's, I just, we're on a 4-game pointless streak with Okabe. And, obviously, I think he's done a lot of other good things that has not come up on the score sheet and all, but the 2 games at Minnesota Duluth, 2 games at Miami. I mean, those are games that you expect a player like Okabe to really kind of step up and perform. And, being blanked on the score sheet in all 4 of those games, that's, I don't know, a little bit frustrating to kind of see that. We talked a little bit about Crookshank as well. I mean, he's pointless right now in 3 games. His last goal, it was a 2-man advantage against Minnesota Duluth. So it's, we've got a couple of people who, haven't been putting the pucks in the net. Obviously, Miller, I think, is one that's just been incredibly snake bitten this year. But, if we get these guys back rolling, I think we can do a lot of damage. And maybe I think it's good that we're hitting that slump right now. I remember it was, when we made our run to the championship game. I mean, Miller was a key part of that there when the chips were down in the NCAA tournament. So it's, I think just getting some of these guys back. Hopefully that the bye week, that rest did a lot of good for them. They're going to come out refocused, and we got to like I said, take care of North Dakota. This team, can still put the puck in the net. They are, um, still really dangerous when it comes in the offensive zone. Jackson Blake is, probably one of the best, one of the premier freshmen there in the country. So it's, they still have a lot of weapons, and it's just capitalizing on our chances is going to be, is obviously going to be the main factor and the main key. And this is the weekend to do it, and this is against the team to do it. Like I said, sitting down in seventh place, it's I don't know. I don't know. I would hate to drop out of home ice, especially when we were talking about that home ice record. And I'm worried about it right now. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm worried about it. And we've got just these last couple of games, like you said, Omaha next week and the week after against Minnesota Duluth, who we've already dropped 2 games to. I don't know. I just want to I want to see a lot of positives this weekend, and I'm just nervous that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So just by the sound of it, I'm a lot more pessimistic than you are, which is a little bit of a turn than the norm.
Yeah, well, it's good to change it up. Yeah, I'm not terribly worried about falling out of home ice position. Essentially, your magic number is 3 regulation wins. Combination of 3 wins or Duluth/CC, because they're tied right now for 23 points. So, out of the last 6 games, like Duluth goes to Denver this weekend. I don't think they're going to sweep that series, Duluth. So, you get a win here this weekend and Duluth gets a loss. Or if you split here against Duluth or North Dakota and Duluth gets swept, I guess depending on what CC does, you've at least clinched home ice over Duluth and Dakota for that matter. So I mean, it could happen this weekend where you clinch home ice. So I think it'll take, and you do still have that Duluth series at home at the end of the year. And so you just want to at least not go into that series having Duluth having a chance if they sweep to jump you. And Duluth having Miami next weekend obviously bodes well for them schedule, strength of schedule wise, but you got this Denver series here, which you might be able to gain even more ground on Duluth this weekend. So I'm not terribly worried about it yet, but I might be. Looking at the standings, you got three-way tie for second right now. Western, Omaha, and St. Cloud. Which I guess means Duluth and CC
Western does have one more regulation win.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of moot to break the tie because, St. Cloud and Omaha haven't even played each other yet. But if you were just to get practice on tiebreaker scenarios, Western would be second place because they've got the more regulation wins than both Omaha and St. Cloud does. And St. Cloud, I believe, would hop Omaha because of a goal differential. I was looking at that this weekend. Again, it's moot because they haven't played each other yet. It'll work itself out at the end of the year. But I guess three-way tie for second means that Duluth and CC are tied for third then, using Omaha math. And
hashtag Omaha.
And then that would make North Dakota in fourth and Miami there in fifth and last place. So we can use that criteria from now on. But looking at that, so you got the clump of teams at 33 there at second place right now. Western is in, I think, the only position to really threaten Denver right now because they still play Denver. They played 2-game series at Western Michigan. It's the only time that they're going to be playing this year in the regular season. And
so is next week like the one time for everybody then?
It might be, yeah, because North Dakota and CC play. And Miami and Duluth. It must. I don't know if they scheduled it like that. Yeah, maybe I would
They
almost.
scheduled it for this weekend. God, that's so weird.
It is kind of. It's almost too much of a coincidence to not be planned.
Right?
But however, I don't know why that's like necessary to do.
I would think nothing of this if this happened in December. Like,
Well, I
would think
wonder-
nothing of it. But the fact that it's the second to the last.
Well, I
week of
wonder
series,
the one time, like when St. Cloud played Western in the first half. I wonder if they played on a weekend where everybody played their only other, like because he played two teams, one series each. I'm wondering if they do a one weekend in the first half and one weekend in the second half for everybody. I kind of too lazy to check on that, but yeah, I guess that is the case for next weekend. But so if Western sweeps that series,
got to come up with a name
Right.
for that. Trying to catchy name of like the one-time weekend or something like that.
right? But yeah, I mean, if Western sweeps that series from Denver, which is a tall task, but that would give them within, and they play CC and Miami in their other two series. So Western, I think, has the best chance. If they run the table, Denver would have to win the rest of they would have to sweep Duluth and their CC series as well to stave off Western Michigan. So I would say Western has the only other chance to hop Denver. I'm wishing that would happen because there's a chance that you could get, for the first round of the playoffs, to have all conference rivals in the first half, meaning like your designated conference rival that you always play twice a year. Like if Western's in first place, they would play Miami. Denver could play CC if CC gets to 7th. St. Cloud could play Duluth, and Omaha could play in North Dakota. I mean, it's possible. Like how they're split up right now between the top 4 and the bottom 4, it's certainly possible. It would be kind of fun if that happened, but I would still think it's unlikely that Western would hop Denver. But yeah, we can dream about those sort of situations. So yeah, it's
I do have to say that matchup, and that's at Kalamazoo too. That matchup is really intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm gonna watch St. Cloud and Omaha, but I'm gonna keep my eye out, or maybe have that as an appetizer since it'll be on an hour early. But that Denver Western Michigan series, I think that'll be a fun one to watch next weekend.
I mean, Western is red hot. Since Christmas, 9-1, and like I said, got CC this weekend at home. You got to feel like their chances of sweeping that series are better than average. And scored a lot of goals. It seems like they're goaltending. I mean, in the last 6 games here, since that North Dakota, that crazy 7-6 win, giving up 1 goal, 2 goals, and 1 goal in those 6 games. So Rowe has really picked it up. They're a scary team, and that's why, other than the fact that they do have that opportunity to gain on Denver directly by playing them, the other factor that would give them a chance to in the Penrose situation is that they're playing well at the right time of the year. So definitely Western's a team that could be a real factor, not only in the NCHC but in the NCAA tournament. So yeah, they're playing very well right now.
So, any other games did you watch over the weekend? Like I said, I was kind of shuffling in. I watched quite a bit of the North Dakota Denver series, and then on, I believe it was Saturday, I was kind of flipped that back and forth between that series and the Omaha series, and it just felt like it was review after review for both series. I was flipping back and forth, and no matter what game I was watching, they were in the middle of a review. So, what else did you watch?
Yeah, I watched a fair amount of that Omaha CC. Watched more of that series than the Denver North Dakota series, which was interesting. Omaha on.
There were a lot of people online talking about that. I'm obviously from the Omaha side. Omaha felt that they got screwed.
Isn't that like what they always
North Dakota
say?
Fans, obvious. Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean,
hey, a quick weird thought. What are your thoughts on those gray Omaha jerseys?
actually, I had a thought about that because it seems like it's a trend now where teams are using gray as a dominant color, kind of like, an away jersey in baseball. And I don't like it. I don't think it's a good color for a hockey jersey.
I don't either.
Because Air Force has a gray jersey now. Providence does. I believe Penn State. I don't think it's their one of their main jerseys, but they have a gray jersey.
Think Providence does. But I actually like the way Providence's looks.
I don't, and
but I think that's more because of the skate and fryer than anything else. I think that's a pretty fun logo.
Well, too, because their colors are black and gray, whereas Omaha's like gray has really not been a main part of their color palette, but they seem to be wearing these pretty frequently, and I'm not a huge fan of them.
Well, and then you got the gray going up against the Colorado College white.
I think both nights. Well, no, because one of the nights Omaha played one of those like Army appreciation games. They had and that's another one I hate. Camo jerseys. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't like the look of them.
That's bad. That has to.
I don't like the look of them. So, they're. Yeah, I mean, maybe we were picking on Omaha because I was talking about their stream, and now we're talking about their jerseys. I mean,
their math.
So their zoo. I'll be able to.
Zoo.
I'm gonna be in Omaha here coming up. I can't wait. I got to get my jacket out of storage in order to get up there when I go up there. So looking forward to it. But unable to beat CC in regulation on either night, winning in overtime and then losing in a shootout on Saturday.
Colorado College scored on Saturday with 30 seconds
less than that. I think 15-16 seconds left.
15.
Yeah, and they had 3 plays. So Omaha scored twice that they waved off upon review, and then that last goal for CC was a challenge on a possible offsides. A challenge that Omaha challenged it with a penalty on the line because they'd already used their timeout, but they lost that challenge and had to take the delay of game. But obviously that didn't come back to bite them in the overtime. But I didn't think that any of the review. I am on the record to say that I think we should get rid of all reviews. But their announcers even there was one. They had a power play goal that CC challenged for an offside. And it was an offside like a minute before the goal actually went in. Which, and CC never really got control, but they certainly touched the puck a few times. I remember this last year in the UND Penn State game in Nashville. They had one of these reviews where it was an offsides play, but it was negated because the other team touched the puck. But then I remember that was one of the rules that the NCAA got rid of over the summer, which means you can now challenge it even if your team gains possession after the potential offsides. Which I'm not a fan of having more ways to overturn calls. The one thing that I couldn't really. The announcers, they had some, and it was not our favorite announcer. Maybe that's why I watched most of the game there, because it was a decent announcer. But they seemed to have a feed that was very definitive, and they were both like, "Yeah, this is coming back. That was definitely offsides." Whereas I rewound the play, and because their camera work is so shoddy, it was off screen. Like you couldn't tell. Like the camera didn't catch the player touching the puck or trying to keep the zone on the play that they eventually called off or called back. So, and then they also had one where they scored like right after the buzzer for the period, which even in real time, I'm like, that's too late. But they called it a goal on the ice. But then well, again, the announcers are like, yeah, that's definitely late. And then the CC tying goal was like this long, kind of an arcing puck in the air, and it was
I think it was like 20, 25 feet up in the air.
And it was difficult. I don't know how you could really overturn that because it was hard to tell where the puck was versus where the player who was potentially offsides was. So I didn't think that was, I mean, maybe not the worst idea to try to challenge it, because if you do win the challenge, then you probably win the game. But but I didn't think that they were gonna win that challenge there. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really one to stick up for NCHC refs, but in this case, I thought they were, at least according to their own announcers, they were the correct calls. So tough break there, and yeah, they have fits with CC. Did not beat them once this year, at least other than the overtime win that they had on Friday. So 0-2, 1, 1, and 1, whatever. Yeah.
No. Hockey doesn't need to be this good.
That's right. So yeah, I did catch that one. I did catch a little bit of the Long Island Alaska game. Important game.
Ooh.
Important game for Alaska. And
yeah, Alaska just kind of shot themselves in the foot there.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, they lost the game, which isn't obviously good for them, but they're still at either 18 or 19? 18. This is updated after the Bean Pot went final. I always love it when a Bean Pot is decided in a shootout. But so at 18 right now.
Man, I bet they love that over at Bashton.
Right. And I had mentioned
Who won the
Northeastern in the shootout, but it went down as a tie for pairwise purposes. But I had mentioned after.
What a ride Northeastern has had. They were 44 and. What are they at now?
They're at 15. I want to get back to them, but I'll finish Alaska first. I had mentioned after their Denver series where they split at Magnus beginning of January. I think at that time I said they had 12 games left, and I said if they go 10-2, that might be enough for them to get in. That was assuming they're splitting their 4 games against Arizona State, which they swept the first 2 of those games a couple of weeks ago. But now so in that first half of that 12-game run to end the season, this was just their first loss. I mean, 5-1. So, and Arizona State has been dropping the pairwise too. So, it's worse to lose to Long Island than it is to Arizona State. But 2 against Long Island at home, then at Arizona State, 2 against Lindenwood at home. Lindenwood right now, as I mentioned, worst team in pairwise. Now that Stonehill is booted out of the pairwise. So, I don't know. If you go 5-1, might be enough. 6-0, I think, will be enough. It's hard to gauge because that depends on the teams ahead of them will need to lose as well. Lose a few games at least, but I still think it's definitely possible for that. I don't think this was like a killer for them. It might be at the end of the year. You might see that loss has provided the difference between them making the tournament and not. But I do think that there is still time. Yeah, if they would have won that game, just did the customizer, they'd be at 14 right now. So right now it's costing them 4 spots in pairwise. But I still think there's some time if they run the table, or even if they lose 1 to Arizona State, let's say, because that would be a road loss, would be the loss that would hurt you the least. So I still think it's possible. If they make the tournament, it's going to be probably the last team in. It's going to be 14, 15, 13. And it will depend on if there's upsets in conference tournaments. Teams from outside the top 15 nabbing spots from at-larges. But if that doesn't happen, it's certainly possible that Alaska could sneak in as a 4 seed. So interesting to watch them. And Long Island's been playing a lot of these like afternoon games, so I'm able to watch them because they're not playing against any. They're playing these games when no other game is happening, so it's kind of convenient. But
and that's like the morning for you.
That's right. Yeah, I think it was like 12 noon was the Saturday game for them. So yeah, I watched a little bit of that. I was flicking around some of the other scores. Watched the Huskies women's team up in Duluth. Um, uh, Shootout loss and then a 2-0 loss on Saturday. Just 1 goal scored for the Huskies all weekend. Kind of saw this coming. I mean, I mentioned Soderberg for UMD. Their goalie has been red hot of late, and that was definitely the
20th shutout, I think, for her.
and it's something like that. I mean, she's got like 8 or 9, I think, on 9, I think, on the season. So
9 shutouts?
I think so. But so now tied with Mankato for 5th place coming into the last weekend of the regular season, which they play Mankato at home. This series will decide who gets the 5th seed and who gets the 6th seed, which if you finish in 5th, you're going to Duluth. If you finish in 6th, you're going to Wisconsin. Do you have like from my perspective, I think I have a slight preference for Duluth because I think they're a little less strong offensively. They're both very good defensive teams, and St. Cloud, I think, is going to struggle to score a bunch of goals. If they're going to win games against those teams, it's going to be like the 1-0 game they won in Madison a couple of weeks ago, or like a 2-1. Again, sort of a lopsided shot advantage this weekend for Duluth. Although there was I thought the second period on Friday and then the first period on Saturday, I thought St. Cloud outplayed Duluth in those periods. Whereas I don't think they even outplayed Wisconsin for a period in their games this year, even though they won that one game in the Kohl Center. So I would have the slight advantage to go up to Duluth, even though you have beaten Wisconsin this year and you haven't beaten Duluth. But I still think it would be a tough series for them either way. But I would like them to, and because you got swept at Mankato earlier this year, your best chance of you need to take the majority of the points this weekend because Mankato, if you would just split, Mankato would have the head-to-head advantage. So you need to at least 4 points this weekend against Mankato in order to clinch that 5th seed. Do you have a preference between first round opponent? What are you feeling about this weekend against Mankato? I thought that was their one sort of disappointing weekend this year, as far as the one time this year versus a team not in the powerhouse club. Let's say when they went down to Mankato and got swept, I thought that was sort of the one sort of blemish this year. A team that's kind of on your level that you failed to beat. So, how are you feeling about this weekend, and do you have that preference about first-round opponent?
Yeah, as far as this weekend, as of right now, I really like how Adalski has this team playing. As much as, there's 1-2-1 over the last 4 games against traditional powerhouses. It's a 1-0 win, a 3-2 loss, a 1-1 tie, and a 2-0 loss. So I mean, we're in these games. And, with Minnesota State, they're coming off of a sweep against Bemidji, but obviously it's a team they should have swept. So it's going to be a really interesting match here this weekend. So I'm really looking forward to it. And, we're obviously Nyland and Clara they're the big kind of two-headed seniors on this team, along with Emma Gentry. Obviously, I mean those were our goal scorers come from.
Yeah.
All 3 of them I think combined for maybe not half of our goals, but it feels like it. That's where offense is going to come from, and I like the position that they're in. They're in control of their own destiny. You got this weekend at home, and I think it's going to be kind of a fun series, and kind of shows how far Adalski has taken this program in just 1 year. And with some of the recruits already that we have lined up, I'm excited to see where this program is going. So as far as who I would like to see, it's really comes down to who do you think you can steal a game from, or are, obviously 2 games from. And I do feel I see where you're coming from with Minnesota Duluth, because Wisconsin just, they have a lot of tools. They have a lot of firepower. They have always had a lot of firepower. And we were able to kind of stifle them, which I don't think you could kind of bottle that twice. But I could see us winning a 2-1 game against Minnesota Duluth, even though we haven't. So I do see your point there. Easier road trip as well, but that's what I'm hoping. We can see these teams play, and but it's kind of a big moment for turning point, I would say, kind of for Huskies, for women's hockey. So still, I mean, just seeing that we're in the position we are, it's still a really good sign for the future of this program.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I agree with that. That the offensive analysis there. Nealand is, I think, the player that I like the most out of the forwards. She was really impressive this weekend. I thought whenever they were able to generate a quality chance, she was involved in some way. And again, talking about the men's side, running with a goalie rotation for the majority of the season. Obviously, that's been the case for the women's side as well. And both JoJo Chobak and Tanya Ahola this weekend, 2 good performances from them this weekend. It's been the case pretty much all year for them. Ahola was the WCHA goalie of the year last year, but Chobak, who was a Duluth transfer, has been equally, or much of the time even better this year as well. So fortunate to not just have 1 but 2 solid goaltenders in net. You see how that's a benefit for the men's side, and obviously the same is true for the women's side as well. So yeah, even though the results weren't quite there this weekend, I did enjoy watching them this weekend, and hopefully they can at least wrap up. You just want to win going into the playoffs. That's the other thing. Like so sweep the series, you're on an upward swing. You don't want to sort of back into a situation and say, okay, we lost to Mankato, and now we got, bus ride to Madison here. Like I like the momentum pushing forward, so get a couple of wins this weekend, and then steal a couple of them up in Duluth. I think that's your best hope.
Flipping over to sinkers and floaters. We'll go ahead and just quickly, who's up, who's down. St. Cloud State staying at 7 in the pairwise. Michigan Tech dropped a little bit, down 2 spots to 12. They've been hovering around this 12. Last week they bumped up to 10, now back down to 12. But the free fall for UConn kind of continues. UConn dropping 4 spots, down to 19 in the pairwise. And then I realized I haven't updated this since the Bean Pot went vinyl. So who knows how much, I'm not sure how much changed there, but UConn they're not heading the right direction after sitting pretty here just a couple months ago.
Yeah, and based on a bad weekend up in New Hampshire, 2 losses, 1 in overtime, to a bad New Hampshire team. But as I've been mentioning, Maine, shout out to Maine. They were like on a 12-5 streak since Thanksgiving. UNH also has been playing very well in this in the 2023 part of the schedule. Vermont, we saw them take a series at BC and beat Pesky as well. So that's so important, or so much of a factor, is how Hockey East has really tumbled out of the pairwise, is that those bottom 3 teams that I just mentioned are becoming real thorns in the side to these bubble teams. And I saw it again this weekend with UConn struggling against New Hampshire. And so yeah, not good for them. Beanpot update, I guess, Boston University, with their loss in the consolation game earlier, dropped to 6. Michigan up to 3, Denver up to 4, Penn State to 5. BU was at 3, but dropped down to 6. Harvard's at 11. Not sure if that was a change for them based on their tie against Northeastern in the Beanpot Championship. And I mentioned Northeastern at 15. They are, so, we've talked a lot about them rising from mid-40s to now at 15. But I was digging into the pairwise here because there's some weird ones with them. They have the RPI advantage on like Michigan State, who they're right below. They're 15, Michigan State's 14 in pairwise, but they actually have a higher RPI. What's one thing to keep an eye on for Northeastern? So when they had that real dry spell in December, and then that first weekend of January, they lost some pretty bad games, and there's 2 in particular that are killers for them right now. They lost to Union in December, and then they lost to Bentley. Bentley's at 55th in pairwise, a terrible team. Not only do those losses hurt you, but you've lost the pairwise comparison to those teams because of that. Which I was, again, surprised at because they're so low. Union's at 36 in pairwise, Bentley at 55, like I said. What's interesting is that, so the head-to-head, obviously, they're losing that 1-0 comparison because they lost single games to these 2 teams. Northeastern obviously has the RPI advantage of both these teams. So it actually comes down to common opponents. And what's weird is if you total up the common opponents, so between Union and Northeastern, there's 4 common opponents that they have. New Hampshire, Harvard, Bentley, and UConn. And if you total them up, Northeastern, right now between Union, they're 4-3-1 in those games. Union is 3-3. But yet Union wins the common opponent's edge on Northeastern. And it's the same way with Bentley. If you add up the cumulative win-loss against common opponents with Bentley, Northeastern's is higher than Bentley. I actually had to send an email to CHN. I didn't think they would actually get back to me, but credit to Wodan, he got back to me within like an hour. And it was on their website. It was in their pairwise primer. I'd always assumed that that's how they did common opponents, is they just added up wins and losses against the slate of teams that you had in common. But as he described here, what you do is, of course, we're talking about like, you got to make things as complicated as possible in college hockey. Stay with me now. Instead of just doing the easy way of adding up wins and losses, they take the winning percentage. They calculate a winning percentage between each of those teams, each of the common opponents, and then they average the winning percentages. And because of that, Bentley's and Union's average winning percentage in common opponents games is slightly higher than Northeastern. And the way he even described it too, I'm not ascribing any malice to him or that he had a hand in setting this criterion this way. But he's like, if a team is 4-0 against a common opponent, the other team is 1-0. It's just it's a wash. It's just a wash.
Oh, good Lord.
And I think that his or at least I'm maybe reading too much into it, but I think the argument that whoever set this up is that, you don't want one team to be able to beat up on one common opponent and then have that basically rule the entire common opponent's comparison. But it's a lot harder to be 4-0 against a team than it is to be 1-0 against a team. It's almost, I think that they think that the 4-0 is a disadvantage, like that's an unfair advantage to play a team 4 times versus one team playing that same team 1 time. But it's actually how they're doing it. It's an advantage to the team to play the team that plays fewer games. It's an advantage to them because, so there's a way that they can flip these comparisons, but it's a long shot. Northeastern's going to have to play Maine in the playoffs or BU and win those games to flip the Bentley comparison. And then they're going to have, if they would have beaten Harvard tonight, there was a chance that, because Union plays Harvard this coming weekend, there was a chance that Northeastern could have flipped that with a win tonight, but with a tie, they need to play UConn sometime in the playoffs for them to have a chance to flip that comparison around. And I'm only bringing this up is because of that, they're losing 2 comparisons because of this. Yeah. So instead of having 45 comparisons, they would have 47. And I would argue if they would just compute common opponent's record the simplest way, they would have 47 comparisons, which would jump them. They would jump 1 spot in the pairwise. I'm going to call it right now. I think Northeastern is going to be out of the tournament based on not having 2 comparisons. I think you're going to add it up at the end of the year. If they would have 2 more comparisons, they would have gotten into the field. I think it's going to screw them in the long run. So keep an eye on that. Like they had a chance if they would have beaten Harvard tonight to take care of one of those. But the one, and I guess the moral of the story is just beat Bentley. I mean, they're god awful. Same with Union. But for them to lose those comparisons based on that sort of Byzantine math, talk about Omaha math. I mean, we're getting real creative. I don't like that, and I don't even care about Northeastern. It's not. I hope he didn't think that I was some jaded Northeastern fan. Couldn't get a rat's ass about it, but I just don't like the. Just keep it simple with the common opponents, I would say. And so there's your pairwise explainer of the day, is that common opponents are not as simple as you think.
Yeah, that is a surprise. Yeah, flipping that Bentley comparison, or flipping that Northeastern, if they beat Bentley, that flips both comparisons.
Yeah, that's right, because
that's Union, a common opponent with Union.
That's right. Yeah.
So that would have put them at 13th in the pairwise.
And it would help their RPI, because losing to Bentley, said such a bad team like that hurts your RPI a bunch too. So just a triple whammy losing that game to Bentley.
I don't know if there's any other sport. I mean, I guess you can argue with football, college football as well. But you never know what's going to end up biting you.
That's right.
Just in the most random ways down the line. It's because what was it? It was a few years ago. Man, I say a few years ago, but it was probably like 20 years ago now that they got rid of what it was I don't know what they called it. I couldn't remember. It was like the hot hand, where it was like basically they put extra weight into games in the last half of the season. So if you're playing well, like the pairwise favored you if you're playing well towards the end of the season versus towards the beginning. They kind of give you a little more leeway if you lose to bad teams.
Yeah, it was like the last 16 games, I think is what it was the cutoff. Which because I think that would mute the effect of non-conference a little bit, because the majority of teams non-conference is at the beginning of the year. And I think right now non-conference plays an oversized advantage in the pairwise. I think, again, that's one of those things they wanted to put that in there to reward teams that are playing well down the stretch. I think Bentley has too much power right now. That too. Yeah. Maybe that's you shouldn't name your university after a luxury car. Maybe then I'll have a little bit more sympathy for you. But yeah, I think like they would have put that in there because they wanted to reward teams playing well down the stretch. But I think the better argument for that would have been that it makes non-conference less important, which I would be in favor of as well. There's a lot of there's tweaks to the pairwise and that I would definitely be in. And we talked about the how they're counting overtime results, not just in RPI, but in these common opponents and the head-to-head. That's having a big effect as well. So lots of things they could clean up, I think. But
time for another podcast, I guess.
That's right.
We'll
wanted to also mention Notre Dame. Decent weekend for them in that they beat Ohio State and then tied to them, but that puts them at exactly 500.
Up
And
4
so-
spots in the pairwise too.
And they're off this weekend, but then they play at Michigan the last weekend of the season. And Michigan just mentioned at 3 after the Beanpot results tonight. So I'm thinking like, I mean, you could just go into the playoffs for Notre Dame, having them be no more than 1 game over 500. Because then they get swept in the first round. Because they're likely going to play either Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State in the first round of the playoffs. Also a very good opponent. So it would be tough for them to even win a game in Michigan in the last weekend of the regular season. But we can't have them just get swept by Michigan, because then the possibility of them being in the top 15 with an under 500 record is less likely.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm thinking like maybe like a tie, like a loss and a tie, or maybe just a split. And then you can even maybe lose 2 out of 3 in the playoffs. Winning a game against one of these top 10 teams in the playoffs might also help you as well. So I would have rather them, because they went to that, they tied that second game against Ohio State, and I would have liked them to just lose that second game in overtime, because they still would have gotten some RPI bump from an overtime loss, but also the loss would have gone down in their record as a loss, and so they would be under 500 if they were to have lost in a 3-on-3. But yeah, so it's weird to root for something, because you can't just say I want them to win. Like, we want them to win, but then also lose too. So it's a weird position to be in. But this is a decent Wisconsin rule opportunity. So I am rooting for it still.
Yep. We're on the edge of our seat right now for a potential Notre Dame Wisconsin ruled.
That's right.
So, questions. Unless anything else you wanted to go over?
Nope. Let's go to questions. You haven't even.
All right.
You didn't even tease any of these before the show, so we're going in completely cold.
Yeah, you're going in blind. So I totally forgot about that. I was having some mic issues, which, kind of worried about still having, but I guess we'll find out, right? Brian Moose. Feels like it's been forever since the rout of North Dakota in St. Cloud. I agree. It does feel like that was a long time ago. Can we use North Dakota's 2 series against Western Michigan and their latest weekend versus Denver as a potential measuring stick for how they will look against the Huskies? I guess it kind of depends, in my opinion, what you mean by a measuring stick. Like, is it like how they would compare to St. Cloud and playing against St. Cloud? Or how they are going to play throughout the series, like as a team. And so I think those are slightly different answers. When I feel like can you use them just as a measuring stick, I don't think we're playing nearly as well as like Western Michigan. And remember, if I remember correctly, that Western Michigan series against North Dakota, where we thought there would be all of the goals scored, and that ended up actually being the exact opposite. So I'm a little bit more worried about using kind of a measuring stick of Miami as a comparable to how we were not able to beat Miami and they were able to handle them with ease. But I think that's just a little bit of my pessimism showing. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking, that measuring stick is, last Western Denver good teams, and they're not able to beat good teams. Just looking over their schedule, just 1 win, and that was an overtime win at Minnesota in October. Just 1 win for North Dakota this year against a current top 15 pairwise team.
Oh.
So no regulation wins against the top 15 team. Lots of beating up on Holy Cross, Lindenwood, Miami.
Well, they won those games
Oh
at
no,
Western, right?
I'm sorry. So they won they had a shootout win, so a tie, but then also a 3-0 win at Western. So I guess two wins against current top 15 teams, but still that's not many, and most of their wins have been versus lower opponents, not very good opponents. So yeah, the battle tested against good teams metric, they've failed that so far this year, and it's up to St. Cloud to keep that trend alive, I suppose.
Yep. Red Army Omaha says #fix the nacho. So I think still a little bit upset after the Colorado College series. Would you consider that a split? Like, would you consider that a split? I mean, it's 3 points each, so technically, in that sense, it's a split, right?
No, not every weekend needs to be a sweep, getting swept, or a split. Like, there's an
nuance.
Overtime win. Yeah, there's some wiggle room in there. I wouldn't call that a split. Like, so if Omaha would have won the shootout on Saturday, would you call that a sweep? I'm sure a lot of Omaha fans would consider it a sweep.
No,
I know that our favorite announcer would.
Well, because it's still a split of the points of the total points in the weekend.
I remember remarking about this last year, early in the year last year, when us show, like, a lot of write-ups now will say if there's a win and an overtime win, that's a sweep for a team. And I remember at that time, I'm like, no, that's not a sweep. Overtime win is different than a regulation win. I think a sweep should be reserved for 2 regulation wins.
But so you don't think that if it's a regular win and an overtime win, even though that counts in the pairwise as 2 wins?
Well, I thought that's what you also just said, the 6-point thing. Yeah, I agree. I think a sweep should be 2 regulation wins.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I just want a clarification. Aaron, how many people will UND fans push down the stairs? Over and under 1.5. Reference to UND fan pushing an Omaha fan down the stairs in Omaha. So probably 0. Because it's in North Dakota. If it was at home, maybe there'd be more. So,
well, let's hope. I guess I missed that. When was that?
That was towards the end of last season.
Okay, maybe I don't remember that. I mean, it fits. Like, I'm not doubting it, but
yeah, it was 20-something or an early 30-something North Dakota fan pushed like a 60-year-old Omaha fan down in the second.
Always classy. That's the one thing we can always say about North Dakota fans. They always keep the class.
Dan Jacobson, friend of the show, asked, "Are you picking up Metroid Prime on the Switch?" And yeah, when they announced it, I went ahead and bought it. So I already have it on my Switch, and I've already played a little bit of it. So, yes, by all means, I'm very excited that they finally announced Metroid Prime, which is one of my favorite games of all time, and to see it just so beautiful. So, huge fan. Any thoughts on Metroid Prime?
English, Weldy.
Do you speak it? Steve Orvis. How can anybody have North Dakota ranked? And a screenshot of the Everything College Hockey Twitter account where they ranked 1 through 20, and they have North Dakota at 20.
Again, I'm asking you to speak English. The what poll?
I suppose not being on Twitter is helpful, I guess, in your case right now. There's a Twitter account called Everything College Hockey. So they tweet a lot about college hockey and whatnot. And I think actually like Jimmy Murray is part of it, and Gage Asmus is part of it as well.
It's Asmus.
It's
Now
this weekend especially. This weekend especially. So, I mean, that's probably why
they're putting together their own poll. Okay. Should we do our own poll?
Yeah.
So they said that they were 20.
We go 1 and 20 down the pairwise. That's my poll.
So they were doing a top 20. I've just mentioned this before. That's my main objection with the Us Show poll is, why do you have a top 20 when only the top 16 make the tournament? Top 20 that's a third of the teams in college hockey. So if we're doing this, so compare that to college basketball. If they're going to do an equivalent poll, that would be the top 120 in college basketball. Roughly. I think there's like 360 teams-ish in NCAA basketball. Like, would you really, because this Long Island game that I saw, their announcer made a big deal about second win of the year or second win of program history for over a top 20, a ranked team, because Alaska was ranked 20th in the USCHO poll. And it's just like, again, so 20th best, that gets you into our hypothetical NIT. Like, it's not exactly necessarily a good team. So any poll, that's the only reason that I give the USA Today poll any more of a credibility than the Esther poll is they only do a top 15. If you're going to do a poll, that's just my rule. If you're going to do a poll in college hockey, stop it at 15 if you're going to do it.
Well, I have to make maybe one clarification. It isn't a poll, it is a ranking. I figure a poll is a collective of people voting. I don't know what this ranking is, or if it's just, it might be just.
So it's just
Jimmy Murray behind a computer, right, just going ham on it.
That's right.
I don't think he would put North Dakota anywhere near the list, but maybe he's turned. We've had people in St. Cloud State programs turn to rivals.
Now I shouldn't be even indulging this worthless Twitter poll, but now you got me thinking. Now, if they've got North Dakota at 20, is this like just a chaos poll? Like we're putting BU at 1, and we got Minnesota at 8, and St. Cloud's unranked. I mean, they probably won't be unranked if it's Jimmy Murray doing the poll, but. Like what give me like the top 5? Like are they, is it sensible, or is it just we're just hot takes and trolling here?
It's sensible for the most part. I mean, the top 5 are Minnesota, Quinnipiac, Denver, Michigan, and BU.
Oh, okay. So they are kind of cribbing the pairwise for that. Maybe that's the philosophy. Like, we'll give you the sensible. We'll just kind of copy the pairwise, but then those last 5 spots, which are just meaningless, we're gonna just do hot takes and Quaker Oat squares there at the end.
The last 5 in this ranking is Michigan State, Notre Dame, UConn, Providence, and North Dakota.
It's not chaos enough. I would put Lindenwood somewhere in there.
Put Brown.
Where'd
my Brown voter
put Brown
go?
in there.
God.
All right, you're seeing it. I just put a cereal brand in there. That's what I'm asking.
Where's Kellogg?
Right.
Whiteface Rez, B-dubs both nights. So he wants me to. The odds of us scoring 6 both nights against North Dakota, it's possible.
They just did it. They did it their last series.
Yeah,
do they still do that? That
promotion
at the Herb?
I don't know. I have to double check. I think Raising Cane's kind of moved in, and we switched over from wings to tenders. So.
Okay.
Chris Becker. Good question here. Is a sweep for UND panic button time?
Sweep for UND. So
Yep. If North Dakota sweeps the Huskies, are you hitting the panic button?
probably not. Although my hand will be poised over the panic button. Like it'll be close.
It'll be hovering.
Yeah, like again, like I said last week, like I wouldn't mind St. Cloud dropping a little in pairwise. We just don't want to get too slippery with that. So that's probably why, like, even if they get swept this weekend, if they get swept this weekend and then they get swept in Omaha, I will be here sounding the alarms. But this weekend, yeah, not quite, but I don't like that we're even considering it, like the question. Like it's getting close to that. But I think, again, just give me a split. Just give me one win this weekend, and I think I'll feel a lot better about this team. And like maybe not. Like if they lose if they win 2-1 and lose 7-1, then who knows? But yeah, I'll try to stay level-headed, and I'll say not quite panicking yet, but again, preparing for a panic.
Sure. I do think there's it'll be tough for me not to start like panicking, especially, a lot of it is going to depend on how we lose. Like if we keep losing the same way and it's, we take 7 penalties and North Dakota goes 5 for 7 on the power play. And it's, things like that where we just keep actually beating ourselves. It's, I would start kind of panicking. Like, what is this staff? What are these players doing where we keep hurting ourselves more than the other team is hurting us? And that we're still not learning from those mistakes. That's when I'll kind of really start panicking. I just want to see improvement in those areas. So if I see those improvements in those areas and we split, yeah, I'm going to feel a lot better. Now if we see improvement in that area and we get swept, I'm going to be not as close to panicking as if we kind of lose the same way and get swept, if that makes sense. Just because it's like, okay, we find some improvement. It wasn't our weekend. I think we're still going to be in a good position. And again, just we control our own fate still at that time, but we're once we get everything back clicking, we're going to be okay. I do think a lot's going to depend on that, Crookshanks line. I think that is I feel like they're going to have a big weekend. I think Okabe's going to have a big weekend, and then I just think some solid defensive play is gonna go a long way as well. Because this is a team that can't stop a puck. So that's what yeah, that's kind of where I'm seeing where this is at. So I'm not hitting the panic button if we get swept. If we have movement towards everything kind of stacking up the right way. If we keep losing the same way, I'm gonna start really going Chicken Little.
Well, let's hope we don't hit that stage.
Right.
But
God, if they go 5 for 7 on the power play, I'm just gonna go fetal and cry. Eric Zamora, how long until UND is back to the powerhouse we expected? I mean, I would imagine that this is a once in a decade type down year for North Dakota. And this is like this down year, even if we look at the pairwise here, their down year is still in the early 20s, so it's not like they're going through this huge rebuild or anything like that. But I think it's just crazy to me that North Dakota, because it's the same problem they've had all season is their defense and they can't stop a puck. So I think that's, through recruiting or transfer portal or something, you should be able to get a good fix. But they thought going through the transfer portal, they'd get DeRitter, who would be solving that problem. That hasn't happened. So I don't expect it to be too long before North Dakota's back on top, though, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of seen not rebuild, because they're over 500 in both 17-18 and 18-19, but both of those years they did not make the NCAAs, which snapped a long NCAA qualifying streak. They have not had a losing season since 01-02, back in the Blaze days. But they were, at that point, that the 2-year drought, I was even thinking Barry's seat was hot. I'm sure North Dakota fans were thinking the same way. He wins the national title his first year, but inheriting a lot of Hackstall's guys. I mean, he had been on the staff, so it's not like he was fresh to the program, but not putting a ton of stock into the national title winning year for him being the first year. And then as he sort of starts to develop his style of recruiting, it hit a lull there. But to his credit, they come back. The COVID shortened year, I believe they were either number 1 overall or in the top 2 or 3 of that year. They were number 1 overall in the following year, the number 1 overall seed in that tournament that year, and were able to make the tournament last year, even kind of after a first half struggle last year as well. So he was able to sort of right the ship after a couple years of middling. One of those years they didn't even make the NCHC tournament. The only time they have failed to make that, make the XL. So yeah, I mean, North Dakota has a lot of advantages for a program. I mean, that building does a lot of the recruiting for it, and so I don't expect. It was before my time. I mean, I was alive, but I remember looking through the history, years ago, to after they won in '87, those early '90s teams, they were a pretty bad team. 92, 93, they were 12-25 and 11-23. I can never imagine a North Dakota team having those kind of records.
Yeah.
So I don't even think the bottom has completely fallen out here. The bottom falls out and they go in 2018, 2019, 18, 17-2. That's a disastrous season in Grand Forks. So they got a long way to hit, the depths of where Miami's been for the last decade and CC. And I do think that they're gonna be. I mean, let's not forget, that the recruiting class they brought in this year. I mean, Blake and James have been good. Quite good, actually. But those guys are still freshmen. I mean, if they get another year out of those guys, they could certainly be back next year. And as you said, there's still time this year to turn it around. So I think it's wrong to think that they're dead and buried here for this year, and especially long term. It's just a program that is able to avoid long droughts because of their history and their building provide a recruiting advantage that other programs only dream of. So I don't think it's going to be. I would not be surprised if this is just a blip. But at the same time, and as you said too, the transfer portal, I just think that they've swung and missed the last 2 years. You can call it Driscoll as well. I mean, they made the tournament with him, but he didn't play all that hot for him last year either. And I think that they'll regress to the mean when it comes to getting base hits on transfer portal guys. You know what I mean? They've kind of gotten the worst possible outcome from the transfer portal. And same as where I think that you shouldn't expect St. Cloud to hit the home runs that they did in the transfer portal this year with Bassey, Crookshank, and Anhorn. Don't expect that to be the case every single year. There's going to be some regression to the mean there. And also from North Dakota, if they need to pick up a goalie, for instance, again this offseason, their success rate almost has to be better than what it has the last 2 times in there. So, yeah, I think that they've had some bad luck in there, but not really weeping too much for them. But yeah, I don't think this is even a catastrophe of a year this year already. And I don't expect this to sink them into some, long decades of irrelevance. A guy can dream, but I just don't see it.
So we will. So that about does her for this episode of the Huskies Hockey Podcast. You can find me, Weldy, at More Clappers, MOAR, More Clappers. You can find Andrew. He will be emailing Woden about being a jaded Northeastern fan. What email do you use for that?
That is Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com.
God, yeah, no wonder that.
Well, I didn't use that email. If I would have, then I'm sure, would think that I'm a Northeastern fan. But that's a good. I should have used that account. So.
Drop us a message. Thank you for listening, and until next time, go Huskies! Woo!
Woo!